Steve, do you remember your first real estate deal ever?
I do actually. The first deal I ever did in real estate was my first wholesale deal, and it was actually a double close. I paid to take a course. I paid a guy $10,000. I never met him, and not to date myself, but it was much before a lot of the internet stuff. So everything I did, all the communication was by phone and by fax. So he would fax me the information of what I had to learn. And I paid the guy $10,000, and he taught me how to basically wholesale a property and do what's called the double closing, where basically I found a motivated seller. And after I got the motivated seller, basically that was going into foreclosure, it was a pre-foreclosure. And then I had to find the buyer. And I had no idea how to do either. I didn't even know how to make the transaction work. And so a double closing was basically I closed with the seller, and basically at the same time or minutes later, I closed with the buyer. So I found a buyer, everybody wanted it, we had the deal. We were fighting the clock literally within hours of the bank foreclosing. We ended up doing it, we did the double close, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know if I was doing it right, I didn't know if I was doing it wrong. I relied on the title company to kind of guide me. And it was probably one of the most scariest things because I just didn't know what I didn't know. Looking back, I remember thinking to myself, how in the world did I actually make this happen now that I know so many things that have to happen and transpire? And it just goes to show you can do things on your own without knowing the end result if you just listen and follow instructions. And that's exactly what I did. I just followed instructions and I trusted his process, and I ended up getting a deal, and it was about a $20,000 profit on my first deal.
What made you want to wholesale as opposed to just go buying a property and holding it?
Yeah, so at the time, this was when the airlines were doing a lot of furloughs, and I was on the furlough list. And maybe it was the Chicken Little in me. I was a little scared. I didn't want to go ahead and put my money down on a property if I thought that I was going to be losing my job. And so that kind of scared me. So I was able to kind of straddle the fence, if you will, that I was able to get into real estate and learn about real estate, but I didn't have to use any of my money because I basically made money out of the two transactions. So it was a way for me to get involved without the commitment issues of actually owning the property if I would have actually lost my job.
And did you continue to wholesale after that, or did you just start buying and leasing at that time?
I did. I continued to wholesale for probably the next, I would say about 3 years. And I got really, really good. The one thing I learned about wholesaling was your money is made on communicating and negotiating. So I learned how to basically negotiate, and I took a lot of classes on negotiation and how to be a better communicator. I started doing a lot of transactions. I actually did so many transactions that I saved up enough money just from doing deals to go into partnership on my first apartment complex. That first apartment complex that I went in on is where I met my business partner, Pete Newbig, and then we stayed partners from then on. So one led into the other. And when I bought the apartment complex, he wanted to know how I was able to wholesale and do such a good job at it. I wanted to learn how he owned apartment complexes and how he ran apartments. So he wanted to learn from what I was doing, and I wanted to learn what he was doing, kind of the grass is greener theory. And so I looked at what he was doing to be much better because he had a passive income and he had money coming in. He liked what I was doing because I was making about $20,000 every time I did a deal, and I was doing 2 to 3 deals a month doing transactions. So it was very, very lucrative, not much downside, but the problem with mine was it was a job. As soon as I stopped working, the money stopped coming in. So I did not, it's like motivation. It runs out over time, and it's like a battery. If you don't recharge it, it starts draining, and that's why I kind of wanted to get out of it, because after 2 or 3 years, I was very burnt out on it.
So your first deal was not just a single family home, it was an actual multifamily complex that you jumped into.
My first deal was a multifamily. That was the first deal I ever did, was a multifamily complex. I got into it, I liked it, and then I subsequently bought some single family houses after that while I still owned the complex. But yeah, my first transaction I ever did was a multifamily. It was I believe it was a 3940 unit complex.
And did you end up making money on that deal, or was that one that cost you money and was a lesson later on?
No, actually we made money on it. And what's interesting about that story was The property itself was landlocked. So it had a church on one side and it had a private school on the other. And there was a lot of building and construction going on in this area. And so we had a feeling that somebody was going to make a move to purchase this just for land value, if anything. And so 6 months after we bought it, we struck a deal with the church. And they bought it at the increased NOI, net operating income, of what we were going to sell it at. After we had what's called a conduit loan on it. So a conduit loan is a loan that you have to go the distance. You cannot refinance out. You cannot pay it off early. So we had another 3 years, I believe, on the conduit loan. So basically the church bought it. They gave us non-refundable earnest money to hold it. And that was the way that they were able to lock in that deal for land. They wanted the land rights. So they basically paid a lot of money because when we turned it over to them, they turned it into a parking lot for the church. So basically we had to turn it over to them empty. So we had to figure out how to make all the leases expire prior to us handing it over to them. And then once we did, they basically got an empty property because they didn't want to be the ones kicking out a bunch of families. So we had to expire all the leases, gave it to them, made a nice profit. And that was kind of where I got in trouble, because that's when I thought I was so smart. And I thought, this is easy. I've got this real estate thing down. I can make this work. I just sold an apartment complex. I can flip properties. I know what I'm doing. And that is where my mistakes started happening, because I did not pay attention to numbers and I let my ego decide. Please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so you can get more information just like this as soon as it drops.